Okay, so welcome back after lunch. Hope you had a good time. And we'll move forward with the next talk by Zezadas and David, going to be hacking embedded devices. So thank you.
Hello, welcome to our presentation, Hacking Embedded Devices from Black Box to UID 0. This is an overview of our research that we did together. I'm Zezadas, I'm an independent security researcher. Mainly, I work as a pen tester, but on my free time, I like to research embedded devices and hardware hacking.
Hello, everyone. I'm David. I'm a software engineer. Professionally, I develop TypeScript applications and deploy them to the cloud. I've known Zezadas for several years already, and we like to hang out together and sometimes break some devices. And this was no exception. So if you are like us, you were probably born in the late 80s or 90s, and you most likely have a lot of VHS tapes from your childhood that are rotting over time. This is because, as you know, VHS is not forever, and this is what was happening to a lot of tapes that I had stored at my parents' home. And as you most likely have guessed, there is a solution to this problem, which is to convert these tapes to a digital format, and with the advantage that we can take them with us almost everywhere and play them in almost all of the devices that we have. So to convert a VHS tape to a digital format, you need a capture card, and I went on the market to try to find some that would be suitable, and I opted to use this one. It supports both component and HDMI input, has a local hard drive for storage, so this means that to capture videos, I don't need to have it connected to my computer, I can just take out the hard drive. But one thing that I noticed is that it also has Ethernet and a USB port, and on an hacker perspective, these are very interesting ports to have. Lastly, it also has this app, and I was curious to know if I could use this app to download the videos remotely. So instead of having to detach the hard drive every time that I wanted to get my videos out of the PVR, if I would be able to use the app for this purpose. So let's do a small recap. We have this personal video recorder. It can capture HDMI and composite. It supports storing videos in both its internal storage and on USB flash drives, as long as they are formatted as NTFS. It can play videos that were captured by the box and doesn't seem to offer any option to download these over the network. The box also exposes 3 TCP ports, but there are no login services available. As for the app, I tried to find it on the store, and on the vendor's website, there was this notice saying that the app is no longer available. But fortunately, this is not a problem, because there are other ways to go around this limitation, like using mirrors. So I downloaded the app and installed it to my device. And like the box, it is able to list directories, but it only lists the files that were captured by the box. We tried to insert some additional videos in the USB flash drive, and it didn't display those. The app also allows the user to remotely control recordings and playback. And the interesting part here is that it shows this small preview that you can see in the picture on the right of the videos that the user recorded. And I was wondering if there was any way I could take advantage of this. So I reached out to Zezadas, and his reaction was more or less this, that you can see here. And we were during the COVID lockdown, so we had nothing else to do, like literally. Each of us were in a different city. We couldn't meet physically. I was the one with the device in Lisbon. Zezadas was in Porto. So most of the research that you'll see here actually happened over a video call. So the first thing that we tried was this simple test to see if there was any place in the UI where we could input our own text and have it executed as code. This sometimes happens due to some oversights by the developers. We found this option that allowed us to assign watermarks to videos and that allowed us setting up a custom text. So this is what we did. We tried to execute the ID command. If we were lucky, we would be able, if we were lucky and this executed, we would be able to prove ourselves that we were able to execute any commands that we wanted. Plus, with the output of this ID command, we would be able to know what user we are running on, and if we were even more lucky and were running as root, that would be the cherry on top of the cake. But this didn't work. Or at least at the time, we thought this didn't work. The box just echoed the same text that we inputted, and there was nothing else to research from here. So it was time for a different approach.
So we tried the easiest payloads that we could, so we need to do some recon about this box. So for now, it's a black box for us. We know that it has an app. We have tested some of the features and some of the capabilities, but we still are missing some of the information. So for example, we don't know the operating system. Usually on embedded devices, it runs Linux, so we may have a guess. We also don't have any information about the CPU, but usually on embedded devices, it's running MIPS or ARM, and for the chipset, we have no information about it. So we did a physical recon on this device, and we found these test points exposed under the HDD slot. And of course, our first guess is that it could be a serial interface, and usually the serial interface or the WART allow us to communicate with the box, to read the messages, and also to execute and send some commands. So it could be very interesting on this. But sadly, the box was with David on his house, and David didn't have the hardware to test these test points. So it's like a dead end for now. And also, opening the case will void the warranty, which is something that we want to avoid. So we went on the vendor website to find some more information, and we found the open source notice. We can see here some of the software being used, and we can read here that it's using the Linux kernel, so our guess at some point is correct. And we can also read, for example, the U-boot bootloader, which is a bootloader used on embedded devices, which totally makes sense in here. And it's basically like a grub that we have on our Linux computers. And digging around on the vendor website, we found the firmwares with the changelog, and that can be really useful if we are able to extract the files. So if we are able to unpack the firmware, we can have access to all the files and binaries inside the box, and we could open the scope for this and searching for new vulnerabilities. But sadly for us, this firmware was encrypted, so Beanwald tried to find some of the headers, but with no luck, we see that it's using OpenSSL encryption, and of course, we don't have the key to decrypt this firmware. So what we know by now? We know the app, we have tested some of the functionalities, we know that it's running through Linux. We don't know the version, neither the distro, but we are sure that it's running Linux. And we still don't have any information about the CPU or the chipset. And now we have another unknown variable, which is the key to decrypt the firmware. So we went to reverse the Android application in order to find more information and more endpoints and some of the features that could be hidden from the user interface. So to start reversing the Android application, we use JADEX GUI, which is an Android Java compiler, and we are expecting to read most of the code in Java because it's an Android application, but on this context, there was not much code in Java because instead of having the code mostly in Java, this application using a native library. Basically, it's like a .sco that we usually see on our Linux devices, and we can't use a Java compiler to read them. We can see on the line 54 that it's loading that native library with that LOCBP, so someone forgot to change the example name. So for this native library, we used Ghidra. I guess like some of you already know this software, and looking at the screenshots on the right, we can read the strings inside this binary. We can recognize that some of these strings relate to the API endpoints, and that's really useful because we now have more information about the features of this API. And on the left, we can see the assembly and pseudocode, and it's very interesting to see that this native library is not stripped, so we can read the symbols and the names, so it's very useful to understand how the functions work.
So what we tried immediately was to start to use the methods that we just uncovered from our research. We start with the API authentication because this was required by most of the methods. The way this works is that the application sends a request to the box to start the pairing process. The box displays the code on the screen. The user writes down that code using the app, and then it's authenticated, which will be needed for other endpoints.
So once we are able to authenticate on this API, we can now fuzz the endpoints and start to look at them. So looking at this reverse, we found some interesting functions here. So the first one that caught our attention was getFilesInfo that would suggest that it will be able to list the files on the device.
And actually it can, but it's like before, we are still limited to only be able to list the files that are videos that were created by the device itself.
So this endpoint is a little bit, it's no useful, so we kept reversing, and then we found this endpoint, getDirList, that would suggest that it would list the directories inside the device.
And it does list the directories. It lists everything, actually. So you can see here the base of the root file system. And with this, we were able to replicate the directory structure of the device locally. But still, though this is very useful, it's not as useful as it could be. Because remember, we can list all the directories that exist, but we don't know which files exist in those directories.
So we can list the directories, but we cannot list files. So while we can list some of the folders, we don't know what's inside these folders. So we kept digging on these endpoints, and we found the snapshot path get that would suggest that it will download the thumbnail from the videos on the device.
It actually does download thumbnails, but more than that. It is able to download any file that exists on the device, and in this case, we try to download passwd, which contains the hashed passwords of all the users.
Cool. So now we have an hash. It's not the plain text password, so we need to crack this. So I guess most of you use hashcat. That's what we did. And it looks like the password is not very complex. It took us about 3 hours on a low-end VPS. That's pretty cool, but we still don't have any place to insert these credentials. So what we know by now? So we know that we can list folders. We cannot properly list files, only the ones that were created by the box, so it's not useful for us. And while we can download some of the files using this path transversal, it's not, there is some restrictions, such as symbolic links. We cannot download symbolic links, and for example, the procfs files are also restricted, so we cannot use those kind of gadgets to get more content. And we still don't have a way to log in on the device with the credentials that we cracked. So what's the plan for now? So we know the functionalities of this API, we know some of the endpoints, so let's try to find more information abusing these endpoints. So we know that we can download files from inside the box and it's running Linux, so let's use a Linux word list to enumerate other files on the device. So of course we did that, we downloaded some of the files, but they were not interesting for this context. And while doing this, we also found some reference that lead us to the Yocto project. And basically, Yocto project is a tool to build custom Linux builds for embedded devices, which totally makes sense for this context. So we also use some of the word lists of Yocto project in order to find more information. But sadly, it didn't lead us to anything very useful, so we kept testing the endpoints.
And while we were testing the endpoints, this constant sending of these attempts at sending different parameters and whatnot together with some GUI navigation led to these mega crashes. And when the device crashed, it had this USB flash drive connected at the time, which had this LED light that started to blink. And I was curious why it was blinking on startup, so I removed the pen drive and connected it to my computer. There were some password-protected 7-zip files, so this means that this box is using the flash drive to store its logs when it crashes. And yeah, you may say, yeah, but they are password-protected. Sure, they are. But this doesn't, and at the time they weren't. And this doesn't necessarily mean that we would be able to retrieve them using some recovery tools, but it was extremely likely that the files were available in plain text before being archived with a password. So if we try to use some recovery tools, we would be able to recover them before they got deleted. And it was exactly what we did.
So after using these forensics tools, we were able to get the files in plain text because the USB pen drive was used as a cache. So we were able to read all the crash dumps in plain text. So here we can see one of the crash dumps. We can read here some assembly, some function names, and also some memory offsets. So we have now more information to understand what's happening inside the box. And from there, we also found some more useful information, such as the CPU being used. So we now know that it's using ARM v5 CPU. It's a 32-bit little endian CPU. So we found some more information, and we are also lacking the chipset. And by looking at the strings of this core dump, we could find the Linux version and also the distro being used, DaVinci. And that keyword leads us to this Texas Instrument chip that it is used for digital media systems, which totally makes sense for this context. So we now have found the chipset. And also by looking again at the Yocto project, we could find some repositories with source related to this chipset. So we are in the right direction.
Our core dumps also showed us some very interesting thing, which is the commands that were executed to start commands and environment variables that were used to start this binary named encode, and as well as the directory where it was. Remember that we already knew that this directory existed because we were able to list all the directories that existed on the file system, but we didn't know the name of the binary, and now we have some clue here. So we used path transversal that we had to download this binary, and we were able to get this 7 megabyte binary that we for sure were going to analyze and see what could give us. So let's recap on the status of our research. We already investigated the app. We know this is a Linux, and we know the distro that is running here, and we know the CPU and the chipset of the device. We are still missing the key for decrypting the firmware, and we also don't have the password to extract the 7-zip core dumps that we had before. And lastly, there is no way on the system for us to run a shell, even though we have the root passwords as well.
So for a binary with 7 megabytes, we have a good guess that this is the main binary. And if there is an update feature for this, there is a big chance that this update is running inside this binary. So this binary should have all of the information to decrypt the firmware and to extract it. So we went, of course, just searching for the update function, and we can read here some assembly, some pseudocode, And basically, this function will go on each offset of the partitions and will extract all the partitions from inside the firmware, and then it will go partition by partition, and it will decrypt it. And you can see here the decryption function, and if we dig deeper in this function, basically it's just a shell command calling OpenSSL with the encryption key in plain text. So, cool. We have now more information about the device. So we had all the previous information that we found from the app, from the operating system, the CPU, the chipset, and now we have the key to decrypt the firmware. But we still don't have shell on this device. We have the credentials, but no way to use them, and we are still missing the password to extract the core dump. So let's have a look inside this firmware. So basically, we reproduce the logic inside this binary, but in Python, so we could extract all the partitions and then go on each of the partition, decrypting it, so we could get access to the root file system and be able to read the files inside it. So after unpacking all the files, we can see that we now have the root file system in plain text, and as a bonus, the vendor also left us some source code because we never know when it could be useful. So it's pretty cool now. We have the firmware. We can list all the files. There is still some information missing, such as the password to decrypt the core dump. And digging in the files inside this root file system, we can see the crash analysis binary, which handles the core dump. And here, by just doing a string, so we can read the password in plain text. So we have way more information that we had at the beginning. So we have some more information about the hardware. We now have the key to decrypt the firmware. We have the key to extract the core dump, and we still don't have a way to use the credentials that we had to achieve shell on this device. So, of course, we could create a custom firmware for this device. So we know the key to decrypt the firmware, and it will be the same key to encrypt the firmware. But first, it will be too easy, and second, there is a risk of breaking the device. So we're still missing shell access on this device. And after a few days, the COVID lockdown was left, and we were able to be together. So the first thing that I wanted to try on this device, of course, it will be the test points, which are exposed from the case. And something weird here is that while the UART serial only needs 4 pins, there is 5 pins here. And looking, we tested these test points, and using some of the tools that I had, I didn't find any serial interface or any useful protocol in here. So our guess is that these test points are used only for debugging purposes. So, for example, if some of the pins measures less than 5 volts, that it means some component is broken inside the PCB. And for our setup, of course, we wanted to find the serial interface, and we are searching for 4 pins in a row, and that would mean that it could be a serial interface. We can see here the PCB. We already have found the serial interface. You can see, for example, that we are using this FTDE converter. This one is pretty cheap, like $2 on an online store. The picture that I've showed you before, it's the focaccia board. This is my preferred device because it's very cheap, like $5 for the chip, and then the PCB, you can print it and solder it by yourself, so it gets pretty cheap, and it's very useful because it's able to do several protocols. And for the UART serial port, usually there are 4 pins, but you only need 3. So usually we have the VCC or the voltage, which is not needed for this scenario. Then we have ground. The ground is really easy to find using the multimeter in continuity mode. And then we have the RX and the TX. And This seems a little bit weird, but the Rx needs to connect to the TX and the TX to the Rx. So once we find the ground, there is a 50-50 shot of guessing it right. Of course, this is just a simple way to explain you. There is other ways to be sure that we are connecting to the right test points.
That was actually pretty cool. But the only thing that we can do now is to read logs. You'll see here that in this screenshot that we've highlighted that hit any key to stop auto boot. So this is the U-boot allows us to interrupt the regular boot process usually. And by interrupting it, we would be able to tell the device to load a different firmware, for example, that we had stored on a USB flash drive or something like that, and that we could use to run our own code. Unfortunately, we reversed the U-boot code, and there is no code to handle user inputs at this stage. So even though the string is outputted, it's not waiting for any user input at all. And after the system boots, it starts the encode binary that we showed you before. And remember that we have a way to crash it every time that we wanted. And we thought that by crashing it, we would now be able to have shell access. But unfortunately, when we crash it by sending this command, it just restarts again. So we still have no way to access the shell. So we went on the file system and found the init service that is responsible for starting this encode command. And there is a fallback for recovery purposes. So when the box crashes 5 times in a row, and each crash happens in less than 10 milliseconds between the previous crash, then it will stop trying to restart encode and just send us straight to the shell.
So there is escape here, but doing a crash in less than 10 milliseconds, it's really short. We tried it, we tried to optimize our exploit, but we got it 3 times in a row, and that's the maximum that we got. And we need to do it like 5 times, so it's not enough to break this loop condition. So 10 milliseconds, it's too short to do this. So we were a little bit stuck in here. So we had all of this, and we are still missing just one piece of the puzzle. And we don't have the abilities to bend the time, or do we? And that made me think, and I went again on this encode binary, and I found this function that handles the time update. So it basically does a HTTP request to Google, and it looks at the response headers on the date header, and it will update the time with this information. But if we look with some attention, we see that it's using HTTP instead of using HTTPS. So I guess that we all know that we could intercept this. So if we do a request to Google, this is the response that we expect. So we see that's the time that the box is expecting. So our scenario for this is that we will intercept the box. We will be doing a man in the middle. So instead of the box being communicating with Google, it's communicating with us. And now we can control the time. So picture this scenario. So the box will boot for the first time, and it will try to update the time with Google, or in this case, with us. And we'll reply with the fake time. So it will be lit o'clock for the box. And we are able to crash the box, so we send the crash command, and the box will crash. And the encode binary will run again. And once it runs again, it will try to update the time again. And now we will reply with the time in the past, so minus 10 minutes than before. And we'll crash the box again. And we'll do that until we achieve like 5 crashes. And if we do the maths, we can see that 1327 minus lit o'clock, it will be minus 10 minutes. And our condition will be minus 10 minutes is way, way less then positive 10 milliseconds. So that will fit this condition, and it will increment the counter. And once the counter gets to 5, we know that it will break the while loop, and we will fall back to the login. So as a demo, so this is what will happen. So on the left, we have our exploit that will fake the time. On the right, we will have the serial interface from the box. We can see that the box is booting now. We can read the logs. So once the encode starts, it will update the time, and you'll see the request on the left. And then we need to pair, because we haven't paired yet with the box, and we need to be paired to be able to call the endpoints that crash the box. So of course, we want to pair. And authentication is so good on this device that we can insert any pin and it will accept. So it's very useful, this authentication. So we authenticate, and now we'll crash the box. Of course, we want to crash the box. And the box crashes. And for now, we have a positive time in there, so it's way bigger than 10 milliseconds. But at the second time that we run this, and we force it for the second time, the times have been updated, and now you can see that the running time is negative, and the counter 1 is being incremented. And we do it for the second time, and we do it for the third time, and the fourth time. And we can see here, this is our demo. We have the device here with us, and we can read here all the logs, all the fake times that have been sent to the box. After that, we can see that here, fourth time and the fifth time, all of them with negative times, and it will break the while condition, and it will fall back to the login. And we have cracked the password, so we know our password for this. And we are in, and wait, we are root.
So it's over, right? We have everything that we wanted from the beginning, and including shell access. Great. But a few days later, I was at my parents' house, and I was teaching them how to use the PVR to recover our old VHS tapes. Because remember, this was the initial purpose of why I bought it in the first place. While I was telling them how they could use the playback functionality, I noticed a watermark that I wasn't expecting. Now, do you remember when we set this up in the beginning? Apparently, this actually worked, but because we didn't have any HDMI input connected, we weren't able to see it working. So all the videos now have on their top left corner the root user information. So, in conclusion, if we try to use the device for the purposes that it was designed to in the beginning, we wouldn't have to go through all of these steps, and we would have had shell from the first moment. Hopefully, this demonstration has given you motivation to explore the devices that you have at home. As you can see, all we did was putting together several technical concepts. Not only is it a very interesting puzzle, but it's also a rewarding experience that can lead you to get a device that is way more capable than it was before, or a brick. Sometimes things can go wrong. But don't give up. Even if you don't succeed at your first try, try something that you're more comfortable with. Try a different challenge. The important part is to continue studying and trying again and again until you succeed. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
We have one over there.
Hello, hello, congratulations. Quick question. if you had the key to the firmware, why didn't you change it to launch SSH or something like that?
That would mean that we need to create a custom firmware, and we said that that will be too easy at first, and then there is a risk of breaking the device. And at the time that we were doing this research, we didn't have the recordings yet, so we didn't want to break this.
Any more questions?
Thank you for the presentation. So regarding the security of this product, I'm surprised. You didn't find any vulnerabilities on the endpoint?
Sorry?
Kind of command injection on the web interface?
On the endpoints, we didn't find any command injection or something more direct, but we had all of these path traversal that lead us to being able to download files from the box, and as also to list all the folders inside the box.
Okay. Are you going to report the vulnerabilities to the vendor?
I can answer this one. So we tried. Every year we send them an email at the same date, telling them that we want to reach out to them because we have something to disclose to their security team, but they never reply to any of our emails. So let's see if next year is the year.
If you keep 1 year loop, you will think you are a bot. Anyone else? Okay, thank you both for your presentation. Thank you.